Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Cannabis for Dummies by Kim Ronkin Casey with Joe Cranack. Narrated by Michael Butler Murray. Publisher's note. This audiobook refers to figures, tables, and appendices included in the print and ebook editions of the book. Introduction. Welcome to Cannabis for Dummies, your definitive guide to all things cannabis. Cannabis has a long history. Human use dates back to the 3rd millennium BCE, according to the earliest written records. In the U.S., its popularity rose among subcultures and countercultures in the 1950s and 60s. However, cannabis didn't break through the subculture barriers to enter the mainstream until relatively recently. Now, with several countries and many states in the U.S. legalizing it for medical or adult recreational use, or both, cannabis has exploded onto the national and international stage. Interest and excitement are growing fast, whether you're a consumer, entrepreneur, investor, or someone who's just curious about it. Depending on your experience with cannabis, you may know a lot, a little, or virtually nothing about it, or about certain facets of it. For example, you may know all about buying it and consuming it, but very little about growing, harvesting, and curing it. You may know something about concentrates and extracts, but nothing about the business side of cannabis. Likewise, you may have used cannabis recreationally, but have little or no idea of its potential health benefits. Regardless of your interest in cannabis and your motivation for finding out more about it, you've come to the right place. About this book. In Cannabis for Dummies, we cover the science behind the effects cannabis has on people, the rules and regulations governing its purchase, possession, and use, how to buy and consume it, how to grow it and make your own concentrates and marijuana-infused products, MIPS, how to reap its potential health benefits for you and your pets, the basics of starting and running a cannabis business, how to invest in it, and how to find work in the industry. To make the content more accessible, we divided it into 6 parts. Part 1, Getting Started with Cannabis, brings you up to speed on the basics. We take you on a tour of the entire book, covering each key topic in a nutshell. Then we give you a primer on cannabis rules and regulations to keep you out of legal trouble and explain the politics and culture surrounding cannabis. Part 2, Buying, Storing, and Using Cannabis, guides you through the process of choosing and visiting a cannabis dispensary, provides instructions on various methods for consuming cannabis, and provides insight on how to use cannabis safely and responsibly. Part 3, Reaping the Potential Benefits of Medical Marijuana, explains the potential health benefits of cannabis, and provides guidance on how to use cannabis for potential symptom relief connected to a wide range of medical conditions. You also find out about the potential benefits of cannabis products for pets, along with guidance for how to use these products more safely. Part 4, Grasping the Basics of Cannabis Cultivation, Post-Harvest, and Production, is for the do-it-yourselfers among the audience. Here we lead you through the process of growing cannabis indoors or outdoors, how to harvest, dry, and cure it properly, and how to make your own cannabis concentrates and marijuana-infused products, MIPS. Part 5, Getting Down to Business, offers insight into starting your own cannabis business, finding work in the industry, and investing in cannabis. The various ways to earn a buck from a potentially lucrative industry. Part 6, The Part of Tens, features 10 tips for growing more and better weed, 10 tips for enhancing your cannabis experience, and 10 tips for ensuring that you get what you paid for when buying cannabis. As an added bonus, the appendix provides a number of recipes for cooking up your very own cannabis edibles, including infused lavender lemonade, Michelle's medicated blueberry pie, no-guilt nosh, and chocolate chip oatmeal cookies. In short, this book serves as your A to Z guide to all things cannabis. Foolish assumptions. All assumptions are foolish, and we're reluctant to make them. But to keep this book focused on the right audience and to ensure that it fulfills our purpose in writing it, we had to make the following foolish assumptions about you. You're old enough to buy, possess, and consume cannabis. wherever you happen to live. If you're not of legal age, don't read this book. You're committed to complying with the cannabis rules and regulations in whatever jurisdictions you live. We don't condone breaking any laws, which is why we have an entire chapter on rules and regulations and plenty of warnings sprinkled throughout the book. If you consume cannabis, we assume that you're committed to doing so safely and responsibly, which includes not driving high, preventing children and pets from accessing your cannabis, and consuming in moderation. You're eager to find out more about cannabis. While you may know a great deal already, our hope is that you will learn something new, especially if you're returning to cannabis after a long absence. Other than those 4 foolish assumptions, we can honestly say that we can't assume much more about you. The vast number of people who have experience with cannabis or are curious about it represent a diverse demographic. You may be 21 or 90 years old or somewhere in between, a white-collar or blue-collar worker, a housewife or house husband, a doctor, a lawyer, rich or poor. Regardless of the demographic, we applaud you for being open-minded and willing to explore what we feel is a fascinating world. Icons used in this book. Throughout this book, icons in the margins highlight certain types of valuable information that call out for your attention. Here are the icons you'll encounter and a brief description of each. Remember. We want you to remember everything you read in this book, but if you can't quite do that, then remember the important points flagged with this icon. Tip. Tips provide insider insight. When you're looking for a better, faster way to do something, check out these tips. Warning. Whoa! Before you take another step, read this warning. We provide this cautionary content to help you avoid the common pitfalls that are otherwise likely to trip you up. Beyond the book. In addition to the abundance of information and guidance related to cannabis that we provide in this book, you get access to even more help and information online at dummies.com. Check out this book's online cheat sheet for handy info regarding different strains of cannabis, cannabinoids, and terpenes, tips for growing more and better cannabis plants, and pros and cons of starting your own cannabis business. Just go to dummies.com and search for Cannabis for Dummies cheat sheet. Where to go from here? You're certainly welcome to read this book from cover to cover, but we wrote it in a way that facilitates skipping around. For a quick tutorial on cannabis that touches on all the key topics, turn to Chapter 1. For a brief tour of cannabis anatomy and its unique chemical properties, check out Chapter 2. Chapter 3 is a must-read. We include it to help you avoid getting into legal trouble. If you're looking to buy cannabis and consume it medically, recreationally, or both, turn to the chapters in Part 2. We want to be sure you're buying the products that are most likely to deliver the experience you desire, without getting ripped off, and we want you to know about the various ways of consuming cannabis, so you can make well-informed choices. Those who are looking to reap the medical benefits of marijuana or use it for their pets should turn to the chapters in Part 3. If you want to grow your own cannabis and use it to make concentrates and other products, turn to Part 4. And if you want to find gainful employment or explore other ways to make money in the cannabis industry, turn to the chapters in Part 5. Consider Part 6 and the appendix bonus items, tips and recipes for getting the most out of your cannabis experience. Part 1. Getting started with cannabis. In this part, wrap your brain around the multifaceted topic of cannabis, from consumption and cultivation to law and culture. Explore the cannabis plant, its chemical composition, and the many extracts and concentrates derived from it. Find out where cannabis is legal for medical and adult recreational use, and figure out where to go to find out more about specific rules and regulations. Get up to speed on cannabis politics and culture to increase your awareness of the ever-evolving landscape regarding accessibility and acceptance. Chapter 1. Taking the Nickel Tour. In this chapter, weighing cannabis consumption pros and cons, checking out the unique chemical properties of cannabis, differentiating among a variety of cannabis strains, starting on the road to becoming a savvy shopper and consumer, understanding the path from farm to final product. Cannabis is a multifaceted topic, which is one of the reasons it's so fascinating. You can approach it from many different angles, discussing consumption, both medical and adult use, law, as it applies to individuals and businesses, the science behind it, in terms of both biology and chemistry, how to buy it without getting ripped off, the various ways to consume it, how it's made, and even different ways to make money in and from the industry. In this chapter, we touch on each of these topics and more to provide you with a broad introduction to the fascinating world of cannabis and refer you to other parts and chapters in the book where you can find more in-depth discussions. Think of this chapter as Cannabis Orientation Day and your roadmap to discovering more about cannabis all rolled into one. Exploring the basics of marijuana consumption. People have been ingesting marijuana in various forms, mostly by smoking it, for more than 5,000 years. The plant has unique chemical properties that make it attractive for use in certain religious and cultural ceremonies, adult recreational activities, and medicinal regimens to potentially alleviate symptoms of a wide range of medical conditions. In this section, we explore some of the potential benefits of cannabis for medical and adult recreational use, along with some of the potential drawbacks, so you can begin to develop well-informed opinions and decisions regarding its use. Considering medical use. Some of the chemical components of cannabis have unique properties that mimic certain chemical messengers found naturally in the body that help to regulate certain bodily functions, such as appetite, digestion, and immune function. See the later section, Knowing What Makes Cannabis So Special, for details. As a result, 2 countries and the majority of states in the U.S. have legalized medical marijuana use for certain medical conditions. Qualifying medical conditions vary from one jurisdiction to another, but may include the following: acute or chronic pain, anxiety and or stress, arthritis, asthma, epilepsy, gastrointestinal disorders, glaucoma, inflammation, loss of appetite or wasting syndrome, movement disorders, dystonia, Huntington's disease, Parkinson's disease, Tourette's syndrome, and spinocerebellar ataxia, multiple sclerosis, MS, nausea and vomiting, particularly when associated with chemotherapy, opioid withdrawal, palliative care, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, sleep disorders. Remember, unfortunately, by classifying marijuana as a Schedule I drug, the U.S. federal government has declared that it has no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. As a result, and because of the lack of research supporting cannabis's potential health benefits, we need to be careful about how we approach this topic. We can't say it cures any disease or illness, that it helps to cure a disease or illness, or even that it provides symptomatic relief. All we can say is that it has the potential to alleviate symptoms of certain medical conditions, which means maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. A lack of research. One of the big factors preventing doctors and veterinarians in many states from recommending medical marijuana to patients is the lack of research proving or disproving its effectiveness and risks. The lack of research can be traced to several causes, including regulatory hassles. Researchers must navigate through complex regulatory barriers put in place by the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, NIDA, and state regulatory agencies. Restricted supply of cannabis for research. NIDA is the only source of cannabis available for research scientists, and until recently, the University of Mississippi had the sole contract to grow it, and the strains it grows have a potency that's too low for high-quality studies and much lower than current products available in the legal market. Funding limitations. Federal funding for cannabis research is primarily allocated to study its possible adverse effects, and much less so to study its potential therapeutic effects. Challenges with dosing and placebos. Study participants may not accept any consumption method other than smoking or vaping, which makes dose control in studies especially difficult. Also difficult is finding a suitable placebo for the control group. Research controls. Tremendous variations in cannabinoid content and potency in different strains as well as consumption methods are difficult to control for researchers using current cannabis consumers as subjects. Although some challenges are outside the scope of government control, the big reasons for lack of research in this area can be traced back to the fact that cannabis is federally illegal in the U.S. This results in a catch-22, in which the government denies the potential health benefits of cannabis while preventing the studies necessary to provide any evidence. The one big exception is at least 3 clinical studies have shown that low-dose cannabidiol, CBD, is useful in reducing seizures in people who suffer from 2 rare forms of epilepsy, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and Dravet syndrome. Proof for alleviating symptoms related to a host of other medical conditions is restricted to either anecdotal evidence or evidence from limited clinical trials. See the chapters in Part 3 for details about using medical marijuana for yourself and possibly even your pets. Looking into adult recreational use. THC, short for tetrahydrocannabinol, has strong psychoactive properties, meaning it can alter brain function to create changes in perception, mood, consciousness, cognition, thinking and memory, and behavior. Other substances that are psychoactive include caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, ephedrine, cocaine, and a number of pharmaceutical drugs used for treating psychiatric conditions. At low doses, THC tends to create a sense of well-being or euphoria and relaxation, which is largely responsible for making cannabis such an attractive adult recreational drug. At higher doses, it can create anxiety, impaired thinking, and loss of coordination. When looking at cannabis as an adult recreational drug, it's best compared to alcohol, which also produces intoxicating effects and tends to lower anxiety in the short term. Some argue that cannabis is actually safer than alcohol, because cannabis isn't associated with physical addiction, and because it may not be as harmful to the body as alcohol. However, cannabis is associated with psychological addiction, and long-term use, or overconsumption, may be associated with long-term adverse side effects, so it is not totally safe. In addition, because it's intoxicating, a consumer should never drive or operate machinery when using cannabis. Warning: use cannabis only legally and responsibly. Follow the same precautions as you should, when consuming alcohol recreationally. Use it in moderation, and don't drive under the influence. Acknowledging the potential drawbacks. Cannabis isn't a totally safe miracle drug as some present it to be, nor is it a highly addictive and dangerous drug, as others think. It's not nearly as addictive or potentially dangerous as opioids, for example. Cannabis offers many potential benefits when consumed responsibly. However, it also has some potential drawbacks, including the following. Heavy underage use is associated with impaired thinking, memory, and learning functions. One study from New Zealand, conducted in part by Duke University researchers, showed an average loss of 8 IQ points among those who smoked marijuana heavily in their teenage years. Those who started consuming cannabis as adults didn't show notable declines. Increased heart rate, which may increase the chances of heart attack in susceptible populations. Lung irritation, coughing, and potential breathing problems if the cannabis is smoked, including problems associated with secondhand smoke. Increased risk of serious accidents, including car accidents caused by those who consume illegally and irresponsibly. Worsening of symptoms in people with schizophrenia, such as paranoia, hallucinations, and disorganized thinking. Problems with childhood development during and after pregnancy in the form of lower birth weight and increased risk of both brain and behavioral problems, including attention deficits. Check out Chapter 9 for additional details on the possible adverse side effects of cannabis. Knowing what makes cannabis so special. Mammals, including humans, are equipped with a chemical messenger system called the endocannabinoid system, ECS, which plays a role in regulating appetite, pain, inflammation, immune function, digestion, reproduction, memory, motor learning, stress, and so on. The ECS contains cannabinoid receptors distributed throughout the central and peripheral nervous systems, along the endocannabinoids, which serve as chemical messengers to enable communication across the system. The ECS plays a key role in helping the body maintain homeostasis, healthy equilibrium. When an imbalance occurs, the body engages the ECS to help correct it. Certain endocannabinoids are dispatched, and they lock into designated cannabinoid receptors, fitting into the receptors like keys in a lock. The receptors then engage the nervous system to take action to correct the imbalance. The two main cannabinoid receptors are CB1 and CB2. CB1 receptors are located primarily in the brain and central nervous system, and to a lesser extent, in other tissues. They play a role in regulating appetite and pain, and in memory and emotional processing. CB2 receptors are located primarily in the peripheral organs, especially cells associated with the immune system. When activated, they work to reduce inflammation. Because many chronic conditions, including pain, are associated with inflammation, many of the potential health benefits of cannabis are thought to be linked to the CB2 receptor. Cannabis contains phytocannabinoids, a type of exogenous, as opposed to endogenous, cannabinoid, along with terpenes, aromatic chemical compounds commonly found in plants and essential oils made from plants. Here's a list of the chemical compounds in cannabis most strongly associated with its effects. Tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, is the psychoactive chemical compound in cannabis that creates the high. It affects thinking, memory, pleasure, physical movement, concentration, coordination, and sensory and time perception. Cannabidiol, CBD, is mostly associated with cannabis's potential health benefits. CBD is often used by patients seeking relief from pain, inflammation, anxiety, and seizures. It's not psychoactive, so it won't make you feel intoxicated. In fact, it may help to counteract the psychoactive properties of THC. CBD can also be extracted from hemp, and in this form it's federally legal. Hence, hemp-derived CBD products are generally more available across the U.S. 9-tetrahydrocannabinol acid, THCA, is the precursor to THC that doesn't have psychoactive properties, so it won't make you high. When cannabis is heated to above 220 degrees Fahrenheit, THCA is converted into THC through a process called decarboxylation. THCA may help to stimulate appetite, reduce nausea and vomiting, prevent or reduce inflammation, inhibit prostate growth, and slow the progression of certain neurodegenerative diseases, such as Parkinson's disease. Tetrahydrocannabivarin, THCV, is similar to THC and does have some psychoactive properties in high doses, but it has some unique effects that differ from those of THC. It is an appetite suppressant, stimulates bone growth, and may help with diabetes, Alzheimer's, and panic attacks in PTSD. It needs to be heated higher than THC, to about 528 degrees Fahrenheit when vaporizing. Cannabigerol, CBG, is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid. It has analgesic, muscle relaxant, anti-erythemic, reduces redness in skin, antifungal, antidepressant, anti-proliferative, anti-psoriatic, and antibacterial properties. As an antibacterial, it can be a powerful weapon against the methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA virus. Cannabinol, CBN, is a mildly psychoactive cannabinoid that comes from the degradation of THC after an extended period of time due to exposure to oxygen and heat. CBN has analgesic, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, anti-insomnia, antiemetic, appetite stimulant, and bone stimulant properties. It's also effective in treating burns. CBN is only 10% as psychoactive as THC, but it can produce a very mild high. Terpenes are aromatic chemical compounds in plants that give them their unique aroma and flavor. They may also work synergistically with cannabinoids and other terpenes to enhance the overall effect of the cannabis, a phenomenon commonly referred to as the entourage effect. Remember, all cannabis products you purchase at a dispensary are labeled with concentrations or amounts of the various active ingredients, which usually includes amounts and/or percentages of THC and CBD. The label may also include a terpene profile or other ingredients. See Chapter 2 for more about cannabinoid and terpene chemistry. Recognizing the diversity of cannabis strains. Not all cannabis plants are the same. They vary in structure, cannabinoid and terpene content, and the conditions they require for optimal growth. However, the diversity of strains can all be traced back to one or more of the following strains. Indica. Indicas are short, bushy plants that reach a maximum height of 10 feet and have rounder leaves than sativas. They flower relatively quickly and are sensitive to changes in light. Indicas have a higher concentration of CBD to THC than sativas, so they produce a more relaxed effect and are more likely to make you drowsy. The high CBD content also makes indicas more attractive for their potential medicinal properties. Sativa. Sativas are taller and less bushy than indicas and can reach a maximum height of about 19 feet. Their leaves are more slender. Sativas tend to have a higher concentration of THC to CBD, which tends to create a more active, energetic, and creative high. Ruderalis. Ruderalis plants are very short and bushy, reaching a maximum height of about 2 feet. They have a shorter growing season and are auto-flowering instead of photoperiod plants. While photoperiod plants require about 12 hours of total darkness over several weeks to form buds, auto-flowering plants flower after a certain amount of time regardless of the amount of light to which they're exposed. Ruderalis plants aren't nearly as psychoactive as indicas and sativas, so you'll rarely see them on product labels, but you will see them on labels when you're shopping for seeds to plant. A ruderalis is commonly crossbred with an indica and a sativa, or an existing hybrid, to make the latter plants auto-flowering. Remember, sativas and indicas are crossbred to create many of the popular hybrids, such as Blue Dream, Pineapple Express, and Lemon Kush. See Chapter 2 for more about the different strains. Buying cannabis. Buying cannabis has never been easier or less risky, at least in places where it's legal. You enter a cannabis dispensary, show your ID to prove you're of age, and show your medical marijuana card, when applicable, and consult with a sales associate, sometimes referred to as a bud tender, to find the products that meet your needs and desires. The only big difference from other retail purchases is that when you're buying cannabis, you usually have to pay cash. Of course, the process is somewhat more involved, which is why we devoted an entire chapter to choosing and visiting a cannabis dispensary. Chapter 5. In this section, we bring you up to speed on how to buy cannabis in order to reinforce the rationale behind buying legally and steer you clear of common scams. Knowing where and where not to get it. One of the biggest benefits of marijuana legalization is the accompanying regulation that's put in place to protect consumers. When you buy from a legal, reputable dispensary or other retailer, you're benefiting from those protections. Some of the value delivered by the dispensary or retailer is quality assurance. All products are tested and clearly labeled to show the ingredients and potencies along with the levels of any contaminants. You can purchase products with the assurance that you're getting what you paid for. If you choose to buy from a friend or from a black market seller, which we highly discourage, you increase your exposure to risks, including the following: getting robbed or ripped off. A thief may either steal your money outright or sell you a poor quality product that's not worth the money. buying and consuming a potentially dangerous product. You may be sold something other.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?